Now, before I go any further, if you could drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, that would be greatly appreciated. I make content like this regularly, and doing so is all I ask. It really helps out a lot as well. So hit that thumbs up, hit the subscribe button. It helps out a lot. Cheers. Dame, Mr. Lillard, number 0, Mr. Curry, son of Stephen Curry. How do you want me to address you after this? Because you came at the king, the number 1 point guard in the NBA, arguably the best point guard of all time. That's a conversation for another day. I don't want to get people worked up about that. Arguably the best player in the league as well, but definitely the undisputed best point guard in the league. That is not a question. It never has been, and for the foreseeable future, it just never will be. But you came at the king, and the king just dropped a cool 62 points on your head and the rest of the Portland Trailblazers' head. Is it safe to say Stephen Curry's back? No. Because I saw people saying that. How could he be back if he never left? He started the season shooting the ball not his best, but was he playing bad basketball? No, he willed his team to 2 wins from the first 5 games, including a ridiculous performance against the Chicago Bulls, and then a great performance against the Detroit Pistons, amongst decent performances against other teams, which ended in losses. And then he caps it off with just a ridiculous performance against the Portland Trailblazers. Just an absurd 62 points, 58% field goal percentage, 50% from 3, missed 1 free throw. He's slacking in that department. He had a rare opportunity to break the record of most free throws in a row, and he missed one relatively early in the game. Pretty much the only thing he missed, and the only thing that went wrong in terms of the Warriors and Curry, because everything else went fine. Went perfectly, went really well. 62 points. I'm glad this has saved his legacy. I'm glad the 6th game of a regular season playing with a bunch of players that aren't really adapted to a new system and haven't been hitting their wide open shots, that he's been creating a large majority of them with his off-ball movement, his creation as a playmaker, and pretty much everything around Stephen Curry. The offense has revolved around him over the first 5 games of the season, and he's created a number of open looks, which I talked about in my recent video. So I'm glad that now him dropping 62 points is saving his legacy. I'm glad that the legacy of a 2 times MVP, someone who should have been a 2 times finals MVP, needed his legacy to be saved by a regular season game, the 6th one of the season. What's the point of him being such a great player if he can't do it without his star teammates? Because apparently that's the case. Well, he just did it without his star teammates. And Mr. Triple Single only put up 1 point, who we're going to have to talk about. I'll get back to Steph in a bit, but I want to talk about Draymond's Green. Triple Single, yeah, he scored 1 point, and he was probably the 2nd best player on the floor, maybe the 3rd. That's the kind of impact he has. If you watched that game and didn't see what I saw or what a number of people saw in terms of Draymond's coming back and having the impact that I hoped he could have, and I was talking about, I wasn't ready to write off this Golden State Warriors team, even after the first 2 blowouts where people were calling them hopeless, hapless. I was concerned, and I've been particularly concerned with the fact that they haven't been able to make any open threes, because that's pretty concerning. I did still have a little bit of hope with the fact that they've got one of the better players in the NBA, one of the best defensive players in the NBA, a great playmaker, a great leader, and just a great overall team presence in Draymond Green coming back. And he did not let us down, scoring 1 point, 8 assists. The numbers I don't care about the numbers. All that I need to know is he was a plus 20, I believe, probably around that mark. He set up a couple of alley-oops for James Wiseman, a couple of threes for Stephen Curry, and more importantly, his defensive rotations are just... they're absurd. He doesn't miss a defensive rotation. He got a couple of charging fouls from Yusuf Nurkic. He was the one that got Nurkic into trouble. Nurkic didn't know how to navigate around Draymond, because every time he was making the right rotation, Nurkic would look up thinking he's getting a roll to the rim, an easy bucket, or even passing out of that easy bucket. And Draymond's there with his long arms and his great positioning to just stop any kind of flow that Nurkic had in the game. And that was ultimately why he couldn't get back in the game, because Draymond completely took him out of the game. How many people at 6'8" is he? 6'6"? I don't even know how tall he is. How many people that height can take out a 7-foot center that's been regarded as one of the 6 to 7 best centers in the league? Can just shut them out of the game, not by clamping them up individually, although he did do that on a couple of possessions where he pounded and took the contact from Nurkic and prevented him from getting easy buckets, but just by making the right rotations. How many people can do that in the NBA? The answer is, I don't know, not many at all. Maybe none, apart from Draymond. And that's exactly what he brought. Not just Nurkic, he was troubling everyone on that Blazers team. He was giving guys like Wiseman the help they needed. Wiseman looked better out there. It's no coincidence that Draymond plays the most significant minutes he's played all season long, And the rookie that's had problems with drop coverage and pick and rolls and pick and pops all of a sudden looks more confident in that coverage. Sure, he got to see it last game, so now he sees what it's like and gets to adjust, but at the same time, when you've got Draymond on the court, he fills in for pretty much any kind of errors or any slight errors in coverage, in rotations. He's going to be there to make up for that, and he did that on so many occasions. The night's all going to be about Steph and Curry, and people are still going to look at Draymond's game and somehow think that he's not a good player because he scored 1 point. It's just never really going to get to the point where people will understand what he does as a player. I just don't think it is. If you understand, you understand. If you don't, you don't. I don't know how many other times I can really make a video or talk about it in depth about how good he is as a player without having to score 50 points a night like some other players. I'm sick of talking about it, to be honest, because you guys should know my opinion. If you've watched enough Draymond's Green, if you've watched the Golden State Warriors, you know how good he is, and you know that was the best he's looked in quite some time. He does own the Blazers, so we have to keep that in mind. Take it back to 2 years ago, he absolutely demolished the Portland Trail Blazers. So he's got a lot of real estate in the Portland Trail Blazers players' heads, and we have to keep that in mind. We want to see him do that against other teams because the Blazers are just not a task at all for him. He knows them back to front, and he just dominates them every single game. He did that in the Western Conference Finals. Absolutely unbelievable, that final series. It was fantastic, and this game, not quite at that level, but he's getting back to his best. And if he gets back to 90% of what he was just 2 years ago in the Western Conference Finals, this team all of a sudden, their defense changes completely, and that's what they've needed. Their offense, I think it's been criticized a bit more than it should have. I think they've been moving the ball enough. They've been getting fine options, fine looks, like I mentioned in the video before. They've had a number of wide open threes that just haven't been falling, a number of open threes, wide open shots. They've been moving the ball. They could always do it better, as you could always do, and bringing back Draymond is definitely going to help that. But at the same time, the defense has been a huge issue, and bringing back Draymond helps that issue pretty much more than anyone in the NBA could. So that's what I've taken out of the game as well. Apart from Steph and Curry dropping 62, I needed to talk about Draymond's because he's not going to get any credit when Steph dropped 62, but he played a huge part in this. Probably not the same part as Steph because he dropped 62, but he played a huge part. Second best player on the Warriors team tonight. I mean, of course he was. And probably the second best player on the floor, which is crazy to think, seeing as CJ and Dame put up like a combined 50, I think. But he was still the second best player on the floor, in my opinion. I'm just going to close with this. If you needed this performance from Steph Curry to kind of confirm how good he is as a player and how he's the best point guard in the league, just stop. Just stop. He did not need to prove this. This is just what he does. This is what he does consistently, year in, year out. And if you watched any of the games before, particularly the last 3 games, I think, 2 of which were against the Bulls and the Pistons, where he single-handedly took over and helped that team win the games, you should have seen that he's still at his best. He missed a couple of shots to start the season coming off a wrist injury. Are we just forgetting about how he was injured all of last year and might have needed to adjust? We talked about Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, all of these guys being injured. We forgot that Steph was injured for a whole season. So that's probably a reason why he started the season a bit slower as well. A wrist injury as well for a shooter. Keep that in mind. That might have had something to do with it. But if you needed this to validate Steph Curry is the greatest point guard in the NBA, arguably the best player in the league, not going to get into that. That's a debate for another day. Then I don't know what to tell you because he's been doing this and he's going to continue doing this. And if you don't think he's the best point guard in the league, you're just wrong. I don't often say that because I often like to appreciate different opinions and different perspectives. But if you don't think he's the best point guard in the league, you're wrong. That's all I'm going to end with.